last time I was going to present at one of the conferences, and I had this in my hand, and I pressed the next slide, and my slides weren't there. So I've checked twice. I'm Sanjeev, and before I start, I just want to say that I hope you are all having a great start to the conference here. It's my first time at a Peatland conference, and it's been amazing so far. I've learned a great deal. And this talk will not top the virtual Peatland Pavilion talk. That was the coolest thing I've seen in a very long time. So kudos on that. I am part of Phil Jordan's group at Ulster University. Phil Jordan and his team are actively engaged in understanding various aspects of hydrology when it comes to peatlands and the upland sites and the lowland sites in Northern Ireland. I joined their group as a greenhouse gas specialist, and my expertise is in fluvial carbon dynamics. So when you think of peatland, you always think of a system which is sequestering carbon. Probably if it's healthy enough, it would be carbon sequestering. But then you've looked at the pretty pictures from Falkland, Latvia, and Estonia, and peatlands are usually associated with a lot of aquatic networks. You can see streams, you can see pools, you can see ponds, and sometimes lakes. That means that carbon, which is supposed to be in the soil, can then get mobilized into this aquatic network and through the interface between soil and the hydrological networks. So the bit of carbon is sort of leaking out into this aquatic network. And perhaps one of the most under-researched aspects of peatland science is fluvial carbon dynamics. So what happens to carbon that is leaking out into these aquatic systems? The metric to measure that, and if you take it further, that carbon, which is now not in the peatland, but in these aquatic systems, if that comes out as a greenhouse gas. So this aspect is very less researched, and that is something that I'm working on. And another aspect is we still don't know the fluxes of these greenhouse gases from these aquatic networks. We also don't know, and this is one of the most important questions, and perhaps my specialty in trying to understand this question is what kind of carbon are we talking about? It's not just carbon. It's either young carbon or it's very old carbon, because peatland can store carbon with radiocarbon ages about 5,000 years or so. So what sort of carbon is leaking out into the aquatic system? And that requires a lot of new innovative techniques that we have developed in my previous postdoc at University of Oxford, and that looked at understanding radiocarbon ages of gases and this lateral flux of carbon into the aquatic systems. With that, we'll know if the peatland sequesters carbon but leaks out what sort of carbon, and we'll measure the flux of that. We'll try and understand different characteristics of that. And that is something that we are engaged in at the Glenberry Hill Farm site. If some of you are visiting there tomorrow, Phil will tell you more about it there. And from the fluvial carbon side of things, we believe, Phil and I were discussing, and we felt instead of making it a science lecture, perhaps present it as a lecture on lessons learned, so to speak, in trying to understand restoration outcomes from this sort of metric of fluvial carbon dynamics. And that's something that we are going to do in the next 5 minutes in a not so lightning speed manner, but sort of a chilled and relaxed manner. So I believe if there's a clock, I'm definitely not going to look at it. All right, so first of all, how do you measure restoration success? Perhaps the simplest way of understanding this is how many hectares of land are restored. And if you're pushing the policy side of things, have we spent the budget that was allocated this year for restoration, period, done. But there could be another aspect of increased biodiversity. That's an indicator if the restoration is progressing. And the third aspect that very close to my heart, and I'm working on this now, is how the lateral flux of carbon, how has that changed? We're using that as a metric to understand the restoration success. So if you have a healthy peatland, you should have less of that lateral flux of carbon, so less of the DOC export. DOC here is dissolved organic carbon. So carbon in the terrestrial form is locked in, can move into the aquatic network as DOC, and then produce gases and so on and so forth. But measuring that DOC is a good metric for environmental monitoring when it comes to peatland restoration aspects. I can now show you some examples of lessons learned from Phil's research and our recent work at Glenberry Hill Farm. Before that, one of the basic scientific approach here is usually do this, measure something after a restoration, but for more or less way of doing things, we don't usually look at the before side, and then even less frequent is having a control while we are doing this restoration and monitoring the restoration aspect. So these are aspects that need to be taken into account. And I'll show you one example. The chairs are blocking it, but please refer to the other screens if possible. So this is a site. This was an important part of the presentation. So this is approach that was at a particular site here in Northern Ireland. And they used a technique called cell bunding. So you can see these grids here. That was one of the restoration techniques. Another technique was wave damming on the southern side of this particular plot. And we wanted to know which of the techniques are actually doing a great deal of restoration. And we wanted to measure that restoration success in terms of this metric of lateral carbon flow. So when we started out in 2021, I wasn't there. It was Phil and his team. CEL is cell bonding. So on the y-axis is the DOC export. So the lower the number, the closer to BOG, that's the bog, the lower that number is when you can say that the restoration is successful. But when they started out, the CEL was perhaps the one of the most worst possible things that we could do in terms of restoration, because there were other two, the wave damming and BOU, which is the boundary restoration, that they were already very close to the BOG, the bog, So here it looks as if the cell CEL, the restoration technique is not such a great thing to do. But then come in 2025, the cell dot has moved really close to the BOG, but then so has the WAV. So it's really hard to know whether it worked, which technique has worked really well without an actual control, because we don't have before data. That's the most important aspect. We don't really know what was the DOC export in this site before the restoration began. So that is one lesson learned, that we need to have before data. And in this plot with 3 restoration techniques, you have a choice, but looking at this metric, it's very unclear what restoration technique is perhaps really beneficial between these two. So having before data is really important. Secondly, this is something that we are engaged in at the Glenberry Hill site. The data on the top in red is a forest to bog restoration plot. And as you can see, the peak in that red sort of waveform is decreasing. So it's moving more closer to how the bog should be, which is at the lower, you can't see here, but on the sides. So the peak is reducing. The peak of DOC export in the forest to bog restoration site is decreasing. That means the restoration is working. But again, in the red dots, there are red dots which are unfilled. So we don't really know whether the previous year's DOC export was what the red dot, unfilled dots are showing. So all we have is data from the 5th of May, I think May 2022 or something. So it's the filled red dots. We don't really know if that trend is something that we could take it at face value. So again, here, another aspect of having the before data, and we still don't have a control site. So we don't know this change in DOC export. Was it linked to climate extremes, some change in precipitation, some change in, there was a wildfire, things like that. So it's very important to have a control site as well. The control site would give you clear indication if there are any weird changes that one would not account for, and that's something. So there's before and there's control data that's missing. And scientifically, we would need to have these red dots unfilled as filled dots, so that you really know how it was before the restoration work began. So these are two lessons learned about before and control. Now I'm going to show you a third example where everything was great. So you can't see, but there's a red arrow. It says before. So there's a before data between 2020 and 2021. There's a after data, which is from 2022 and 2024. The impact is quite clear. And you can see the control site in gray clearly shows that the site behaved differently than the restored site because it was of another factor, not linked to restoration. And the restoration, peatland restored site, is perhaps behaving the manner in which the restoration should progress. So this is an example where before, after, control, and impact, all the conditions were fulfilled. And that is perhaps the only take-home message from this not-so-lightning talk, that you need to think about the BACI approach, before, after, control, and impact. And that's the only thing I'm going to leave you with from this talk. Thank you very much.